Last week we talked about the idea that we don't have to see. You remember what the rest of that sentence is? We don't have to see eye to walk side by side. And if you struggle to remember that, I want you to remember how difficult teaching is. And if you want to teach in a way that is unforgettable, what you want to do is reduce it to a slogan and then repeat that slogan several times over the next weeks and months. You want to say it often. You want to get it into your vocabulary. And if you will do that regularly, you will get to the point where people do not have to work to remember what you said. They will not be able to keep from remembering what you said. We do not have to see eye to walk side by side. And there is no better illustration of this than in our first verse of today's reading, and that is 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect. Now, you may want to spend a little or more time with this. I call this the sermon before the sermon, and didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I violated one of my key rules about teaching, and that is to teach one idea, and I had two ideas. We spent a little bit of time on this, and you can debate whether or not you want to spend a lot of time or a little bit of time on this. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time with you on this because it's been on my mind and heart these days. And the first observation I would invite you to see is this, that election is the doctrine that all Bible-believing Christians believe. The word election, the word called, the word predestination, they are all in the book. And all Bible-believing Christians believe in predestination. And if anybody ever asks you, do you believe in predestination? I want you to say, yes, I do believe in predestination. You may not believe what John Calvin believed about predestination, or you might. You might not believe what R.C. Sproul and Piper and MacArthur and others believe about predestination, but all Bible-believing Christians have to believe in predestination because predestination is in the book. I'll never forget preaching on this one time, and a guy came up to me afterwards and he said, I pretty much just went through Romans 9, just verse by verse, and then paraphrased it. I'll never forget, he came up to me afterwards and he said, I really agree with what you had to say there, but if you push that too hard, you'd end up believing in predestination. And I want to say to you, predestination is in the book. The second observation is this, election, that this doctrine has caused great controversy. Proceed with caution and humility. And I've had the experience, and perhaps you have as well, of teaching on this, and then someone will come up to you afterwards and they'll say, you know what? I've never really thought about this before, but as I've been thinking about it, here's what I came up with. And what they're saying is Calvin thought about this his whole life, and Luther thought about this whole life, and R.C. Sproul thought about this his whole life, and R.C. Sproul probably never came up with what I'm about to tell you. And I'm about to unscrew the unscrutable mysteries of God. And we ought to proceed with some caution and humility. We ought to read books on the opposite side of whatever our view is. If you are an Arminian, you ought to read a Calvinistic book. If you are a Calvinist, you ought to read an Arminian book. You ought to read deeply on both sides so that you can be well informed. I believe you do not really understand the issue until you can state the other man's position in such a way that he would agree with him. And I'm going to show you an example in just a moment of where that principle was greatly violated. But we ought to proceed with caution and humility. And I hope you can have in your class today what I had with my brother-in-law and sister the other day. I was up in Colorado Springs, and we went out and took a hike, and this has been kind of on my brain these days. So I asked them some questions, and they clarified my thinking to some degree, and I believe I might have clarified their thinking. And but it was a real friendly conversation, and nobody left mad. And we had dinner together, and so on. And we talked a little bit about Calvinism, and then talked a little bit about the mountains and the hike, and this, that, and the other. And this is my dream for your group: a kind of big tent theologically a group where we can agree to disagree, and we can argue with one another in a smiling, friendly way, and we can push one another, and we can deepen one another's understanding. And as iron sharpens iron, one man can sharpen another. Now, to imagine that this idea is simple is to imagine that you are smarter than the best Christian minds of history. To imagine that this is just simple and it doesn't require a lot of thought, you have not thought about it, and you have not studied the Bible deeply. All right, third observation is this: election is based on foreknowledge. This comes right out of our text. Let's look at the very next verse. The very next verse says, 1 Peter 1:2, who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God. The same thing is said in Romans 8:29, where it says, for those God foreknew, he also predestined. Predestination is based on foreknowledge. Now, the $64,000 question is, what did God foreknew? What did he know about you that